everyone! In this video I'm going to introduce you to mass transport in plants and the structures that are needed to allow for transport of substances around the plant. First thing we need to have a look at, before we begin to look at plants in particular, we need to have a look at surface area to volume ratio, just so you understand the need for mass transport in both plants and animals. I'm going to take you through in the next couple of slides how to work out surface area to volume ratio, and you may have already done this at GCSE, but I will go through this now just in case you haven't. So you can see in the picture there are three different cubes. You've got a 1:1, 1x1 cube, a 2x2 cube, and a 3x3 cube. The 1x1 cube has a surface area to volume ratio of 6:1. So that means that your surface area is 6 times bigger than your volume in that case. When you get to the 2x2 cube, your surface area to volume ratio is 3:1. And when you get to the 3x3 cube, your surface area volume. So here we go, I've got the same cubes again, this time however the big one is 4x4x4. So in the first cube, which is 1x1x1, I work out the surface area by working out the area of each face. So to do that I would do 1 times 1, which is 1. As there's 6 faces on my cubes, I times that by 6. So for cube A the surface area is 6. The volume is the height times the width times the length, so that's 1 times 1 times 1, so my volume is 1. To work out the surface area to volume ratio, I do 6 divided by 1, because you do the big number divided by the small number, and that gives me a surface area to volume ratio of 6:1. For cube B, my surface area is now 24, because I do 2 times 2 to work out the area of one face of the cube, that gives me 4, then I times it by 6 to work out the total surface area of the cube, which gives me 24. The volume is 8 because it's 2 times 2 times 2, because that's the height times the length times the width. Therefore, to work out my surface area to volume ratio, I do 24 divided by 8. So for my 2x2x2 cube, my surface area to volume ratio is 3:1. For my 4x4x4 cube, my surface area is now 96, because I've done 4 times 4 to get the area of one face, times that by 6, which is 96. For the volume, I've done 4 times 4 times 4, because that's my height, width and length, so I've got 64 there. So 96 divided by 64 is 1.5, so my surface area to volume ratio is 1.5:1. Now, you might be thinking, why have I spent some time explaining this? The reason is this has huge consequences for different organisms. So for example, a large organism, so that could be humans, elephants, it could be trees, ferns, anything that's bigger really than a bacteria, you have more exchange to take place to meet your needs. Okay, so you need a larger volume. If you think of all the metabolic reactions that's going to happen in that organism, you need a huge volume of substances to be able to do these. However, each unit of volume is supplied by a proportionally decreasing surface area. So for example, if humans are trying to take all the things that we needed through our skin, then we wouldn't be able to survive, because the cells in the middle of our body would never be able to get all the things that they need to be able to carry out their metabolic functions. Therefore, we've had to develop these mass transport systems. Mass transport systems in humans you will know as the heart and the lungs, okay, so the circulatory system. In plants, we have the xylem and the phloem vessels, which is what we're going to have a look at today. So I'm going to introduce you to mass transport in plants and those vessels in the rest of this PowerPoint. So let's have a look at some practice questions that you may get about surface area to volume ratio and the need for a mass transport system in plants. So firstly, let's have a look at the first one. So it says, like large multicellular animals, plants also require a transport system and cannot rely on mere diffusion through their surface area to gain the raw materials they require for growth and life. It says, use the term surface area to volume ratio to explain why this is the case. So you would say something like, plants have a small surface area to volume ratio, and the reason for this is that they are big organisms. So if you think of trees or ferns or even grass, that organism is far too big to be able to take in all the things they need by diffusion across their surface area alone. Because the diffusion distance is too large, it's going to take far too long to be able, say, for example, carbon dioxide to get to the middle of the plant. So therefore, diffusion is going to be too slow to meet the demand. So if you're trying to get carbon dioxide to your palisade mesophyll, you will not be able to do that in the time needed for photosynthesis. Another particular problem in plants is that the roots contain water easily from the soil, but they cannot absorb sugars from the soil. And the leaves can produce sugars, but they can't absorb water from the air. So what do they require water and sugars for? First of all, they require water and sugars for photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is that process you've learned about GCSE, where you take carbon dioxide and water and it's converted into glucose and oxygen. And remember, to balance that equation, you need a 6 in front of the carbon dioxide, the water, and the oxygen. It needs sugars for respiration. So you take glucose, add oxygen, and it goes to carbon dioxide and water. So therefore, you use again a 6 in front of the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, and the water in that equation. So that's what they need water and sugars for. They need it for photosynthesis and respiration, and they carry out both of those things. So the transport system in plants are found in special tissues called vascular tissues, and the word vascular just means vessel. So if you ever see the word vascular, it means that things are being carried around in a vessel. And they've got 2 specific transport systems that are used in plants. The first is a xylem, so the plant transport tissue that carries water and mineral ions from the roots to the rest of the plant. I've put a little key next to that to show it's that key bit of information. And the second transport system you need to know about is the phloem, so the plant transport tissue that carries the products of photosynthesis to the rest of the plant. And this is from source to sink. The source is where your glucose is made in the leaf, and the sink is in the root. So we'll talk more about that when we do translocation and the movement of sugars. And the big difference between transporting plants and animals is that in plants there is no pump, and by pump I mean something like the heart, and the respiratory gases are not transported by these systems either. The respiratory gases are taken in via the leaf through the stomata. Okay. So these are all the different things that can take place in the plant. So number 4 at the top left there, that tells you about the gases coming in through the stomata. The bit that focuses on the movement of water is 1, 2 and 3. And that's focusing on the function of the xylem. So you can see that the roots absorb water and dissolve minerals from the soil. The water and minerals are then transported upwards from the roots to the shoots as xylem sap. And then the water is lost by transpiration, which we will talk about later on this week. This is a loss of water from leaves, mostly through the stomata, and it creates a force within the leaves that pulls the xylem sap upwards. 5 and 6 are dealing with the transport of sugar. So you can see sugars are produced by photosynthesis in the leaves, and then they are transported as phloem sap to the roots. So that's transported from the leaves down to the roots, where the water comes up from the roots and goes to the leaves. And again, you can see that gas exchange also takes place in the roots there as well. So you can have a look at 4 and 7 for gas exchange in plants. Let's have a look, first of all, at the structure of the xylem, which is responsible for the transport of water in a plant. So just to remind you what the definition of a tissue is, so first of all, the xylem is a tissue, and a tissue is a group of specialised cells working together to perform an overall function. There are 2 ways that water can move up through the xylem. First of all, is the tracheids. Tracheids are elongated cells in the xylem of vascular plants that serve in the transport of water and mineral salts. Their major function is to allow for water and minerals to move through the cells and up the xylem. It will also move through the xylem vessel elements, which is a tube going up through the middle of the xylem. Between the cells in the xylem, they have no end walls, and this is because the end walls of these cells have completely fallen away to form one continuous tube. This means there's no resistance at all to movement of liquid through the tubing system. You also have thick walls stiffened with lignin, and because these cell walls are coated in your rigid, spiral, strong and waterproof substance called lignin, these are strengthened and thickened. So your lignin strengthens and thickens the xylem wall and prevents the xylem collapsing under low pressure. It also provides waterproofing, so it reduces water loss because it stops it leaving the sides of the xylem vessel elements. And also, the cell walls of the cells have open holes called pits, and these allow liquids to move sideways which you might see referred to as laterally. So if it says laterally, that means sideways, in and out between the vessels as required. Let's have a look at the structure of the phloem. Again, the phloem is a tissue, which is a group of specialised cells working together to perform an overall function. You have companion cells in the phloem, which allow for the loading of the sugars into the sieve tube elements, and it's within the sieve tube elements that the sugars are able to travel from the leaf down to the roots. And we'll talk about this later on in the course. The sieve tube elements, the cells within them have end walls with perforation. These are heavily perforated to form structures called sieve plates. This allows liquid to move easily along the tubing system from cell to cell with little resistance, so it can move easily through the phloem. Within the sieve tube elements, the amount of cytoplasm and the number of organelles in these cells is reduced to an absolute minimum, so this means that the cells even lack a nucleus. This allows more space for the transport of fluids and less resistance to the flow through the sieve tube elements. And your companion cells have cytoplasm filled with a very high concentration of mitochondria and ribosomes. This allows the cells to support other cells with little cytoplasm by supplying proteins and ATP. So because the sieve tube elements have lost most of their organelles, the companion cells can supply them with all the things that they can't make due to that. Okay, so let's compare the xylem and the phloem. So the transport method used in the xylem is transpiration. The transport method used in the phloem is translocation. Transpiration means the movement of water and minerals. Translocation is the movement of sucrose, and you can see this on the next slide where it says substance transported. Well, in the xylem that is water and minerals, and in the phloem it is sucrose. Cells in the tissue. So in the xylem they have the xylem vessel and the tracheids. In the phloem, they have the sieve elements and the companion cells. And the important thing is that your xylem vessel is dead. So those xylem vessel cells that have become lignified are dead, whereas all the cells in the phloem are alive. In the xylem, the cell wall structure is coated in waterproof lignin. Whereas in the phloem, it has many plasmodesmata, and plasmodesmata are small gaps in the cell wall allowing for the cells to communicate and pass substances between each other. In the xylem, your cell wall ends have fallen away completely to form a continuous tube, whereas in the phloem, they are perforated to form sieve plates. In the xylem, it transports water and minerals from the roots to the leaves. In the phloem, it transports it from where the sugars are made, so generally in the leaf, to where they are used. Let's have a look at where the xylem and the phloem are in the stem. So if you can see on the microscope picture what that would look like and where you would find them. So you can see in the stem, on the outside you have the epidermis, in the middle you have the cortex. The bit that we're really interested in is the vascular bundle. The vascular bundle contains the phloem, the cambrium, and the xylem. The xylem sits near the middle, near the cortex, whereas the phloem sits on the outside near the epidermis. In the middle you have your cambrium, and in plants this is a tissue layer that provides partially undifferentiated cells for plant growth. So let's see where they sit in the root. So in the root, again, you've got your epidermis on the outside, you've got your cortex just under your epidermis, and then you've got a layer of endodermis, which separates the cortex from the stele. And within the stele, you have the xylem, the phloem, and the pericycle. You can see that the xylem forms a cross shape within the stele in the middle of the root, whereas the phloem is in the gaps between the xylem. Also within the stele you have a pericycle, and the pericycle is another place where root growth can occur. So that was an introduction to mass transport in plants. I hope you found it useful, and of course if you have any questions do ask within the lesson.